Ernest the book. Ernest works for the audiovisual company as well, and he's a fantastic
There you go,
partner.
sir. Enjoy. Thanks, sir.
Excellent. All right.
Ready?
You got a book? Morning, everybody. Welcome. Great to see you all, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And Rick, Sarah, and myself were just talking about how engaged you all are, and how committed, and it's a fantastic group for me to be able to lead. And I'm really excited today to have General Rick Lynch with us, who some of you raise your hand if you've seen Rick speak before. Okay. I said about 60-70%, so it looked like I was pretty accurate. So for those of you who've seen Rick speak before, you know he's very dynamic and has fantastic leadership principles. And for those who haven't, you're certainly in for a treat. And you all got a copy of Rick's book, which he was kind of signed, so it's signed in the front, and he'll be referring to that. But in the back flap, there's a little bio that I wanted to read. So Lieutenant General Rick Lynch has commanded at all levels of the Army, from company 100 soldiers to corps of 65,000 soldiers, to commander of all U.S. Army installations, 120,000 civilian employees and soldiers worldwide. I mean, that's incredible. He spent a total of over 30 months in Iraq, including 15 months as one of the leaders of the 2007 surge, and is now executive director of the University of Texas at Arlington Research Institute. He and his wife of 30 years, Sarah, live in Texas. And Sarah, his beautiful wife, is right there, and I'm sure Rick will say that that's his most important job is being a fantastic husband to Sarah. And the bio is fantastic, but personally, Rick has just been a fantastic friend to me, and as has Sarah to me, and Jackie as well, my wife. And from when I first met Rick a few years back now, here, he was a guest in our hotel as he was coming to Fort Sam Houston and some of the other bases in town. He was over all the Army installations. So he was working out at 4:30 in the morning, and I was in there as well while I was living in the hotel. As you can see, I haven't been working out as much, but I'll have to get back to that. However, we then started to converse and struck up a friendship, and instantly his ability to discuss and articulate the leadership principles that have been successful to him in his career are really inspiring to someone like myself who wants to be the best leader that I can. And it's a lifelong, career-long work in progress. And Rick's mentorship and friendship and principles have really helped me, and I know that they'll help you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rick Lynch.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, don't go away. I'm going to do this first rather than last. So 3 years ago, I fell in love with Bill because we have a lot of shared interest. I mean, we focus on our family. We focus on being the best leader we can be. And we focus on doing the right things for the right reasons. So you all, I hope, realize how blessed you are to have him as your leader. Sarah and I, when we retired, we devoted a good portion of our life to helping our wounded warriors and their families for lots of reasons. So we're on the board of directors for this thing called Operation Finally Home. We built over 100 mortgage-free homes for our wounded warriors across the nation, and we continue to build. And now I carry these coins, and I have my three-star flag on the back, Operation Finally Home insignia on the front. But I wanted to recognize you in front of your team before I started talking, because candidly, you're already an amazing leader. So God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Again, for those who've heard me speak in the past, I apologize. Normally, we don't subject you to me more than once, but hopefully you learned something last time and I can add a new twist to it this time. For those of you that have not heard me speak before, you know, I don't concentrate on the fact that I was a lieutenant general. Candidly, I went to West Point in 1973 only because I couldn't afford to go to college anywhere else. When I left West Point, I was convinced I was only going to be in the Army for 5 years. That transcended to 35 years because the Army went from being a job to a profession to a passion. And the quicker you can get your profession to be a passion, the more effective you'll be. And oh, by the way, I was blessed to be able to command at all levels, so people think that's a big deal. But when I introduce myself, I don't introduce myself as Lieutenant General Lynch, the commander of the 3rd Corps, commander of all installations. I introduce myself as Sarah's husband and the father of Susan Lucas, because that's the most important thing to me. You know, people tell me today, they say, well, General, you know, clearly you had a traumatic event on the 1st of January 2012 when you retired and you were no longer wearing all those stars. And if my identity had been the general, then yeah, probably I would have been devastated. But my identity was the father of my children, the husband of my wife, and that continues. But we have another way cool identity I have to share with you, right? Because 9 months ago, we were blessed with the birth of our first grandchild, Jason Walker Lynch. We call him JW. He's 9 months old, and he is way cool. I mean, he's brilliant. He's brilliant. I know he's brilliant because I hold him, I talk to him. He looks very closely at me and pays close attention. He doesn't ask any questions, which tells me he's getting it the first time, you know. The only problem is he's not taking any notes, so I gotta work on that. But he is a true blessing in our life. And JW only lives 7 miles from us. We live in South Lake, Texas, near the DFW airport. And JW comes over to visit all the time. Unfortunately, he brings his parents with him when he comes. We have to work through that. And we did this thing. I mean, Sarah's way cool with this. So we got this. I call it a containment center. What's the appropriate? Play yard. Play yard. Yeah. I call it a containment center. It's about 7 feet long, about 5 feet wide. It's got, you know, gates about this big all the way around, so you can plop them in there, get in there, crawl with them, and it's just way cool. It really is. It's a blessing to us. How many of you are grandparents already? Have you reached that point? It is way cool being a grandparent. You have to acknowledge. I mean, what's neat about it is we're playing with JW, and as soon as I start smelling some odor, I say, Lucas, come get your boy, you know, clean him up and bring him back to me. Or if he starts crying, you know, gets cranky, hey, Erica, come get your son, you know. It's great being a grandparent. It really is. It really is. So I want to talk today about leadership, you know. You all might not realize this, but you had a very important role in the evolution of the book that Bill was kind enough to buy for you, and I took the time to sign, because a lot of the ideas that are resident in the book are ideas that I bounced off of you early in the process and try to get some feedback. So candidly, you just got to know you had a piece of this book as well, right? You did. The book hit the streets on the 1st of October. You see it now in bookstores. We're on the board of advisors for HEB, so you see them in the HEB stores quite a bit. Sarah and I have been around the nation now doing book signings, and we'll do that for a while. I'm going to ask you to refer to the book a little bit, just so you get a sense of where what I'm fixing to talk to you about is located. Now for the vote, I mean, somebody just moved here from Chicago. Who moved here from Chicago? Have you figured out what fixing to means yet? You know? Yeah. I mean, I was the chief of staff of the Kosovo force in Kosovo, 600-man staff, 29 different nations. I went in there as a 1-star general. I started talking like I'm from Texas, because I am. The French general came to me about 2 weeks into it and says, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? He says, we're all required to speak English in this headquarters, and we do, but we have no idea what you're saying, because I was saying things like fixing to, right? But what we're fixing to do is I'm going to walk you through my 9 leadership principles. But in the back of the book, in Appendix 1, they're listed. You know, and what I tried to do is I tried to condense 35 years in the Army and 4 years at West Point into 9 leadership principles. And then throughout the course of the book, what you do is you hear in my voice stories that I experienced, events that I experienced that led me to that leadership principle, and then you'll understand better where they came from. A major piece of the book that's not codified in the leadership principles is my relationship with God and my relationship with my family. Because my priorities of life has always been my priority is relationship with God, number one, my family, number two, and my profession, number three. And that has served me well. And I hope you have some kind of prioritization in your life much like that. I do find a lot of folks in the military, for example, they just sacrificed their family because they wanted to be the 3-star general. I mean, I'm going to be the general, so I'm just going to sacrifice my family. And candidly, at the end of it all, they have massive regrets because they achieved that rank, but they lost their family along the way. So Sarah is a major piece of this book. Sarah helped me write this book, and my relationship with our family is so important. But Appendix 2 captures the what I call the go-to scriptures. Those things that have helped me over the course of my adult life, where I turn to God and His Word, and He gives me the strength and courage and wisdom to do the things that I want Him to do. So both those appendixes you might find to be interesting. The way the book is structured is around the 9 leadership principles, but as I say, it's written so that you can get into it, read a few pages, hopefully enjoy those few pages, and then set it down and come back to it later. Sarah and I got a note from a lady not long ago where it was entitled, "I've destroyed my book," right? Trying to think about what she's talking about, but what she says in some cases in the book, I laughed so hard while I was reading it, I spilled my wine. In some cases, I cried so hard there are tears on the pages. You know, I've torn it up, I've dog-eared it, I've destroyed my book. I don't know where you are, but Bill and I talked about this earlier. I'm still a person who likes to read with a pen, right? I love to have a book in my hands. I love to make marginal notes. I love to be able to turn the pages, refer back. A lot of folks now are doing digital books, and this is available on Kindle and available on Nook and all that stuff as well. But Bill was kind enough to actually purchase these books for you, so I hope you enjoy it. And I'm just going to talk you through some of the key aspects of it. Who in here is a leader? Yeah, if you're not raising your hand, you're wrong. Because you're a leader in some aspect of your life, I guarantee. You are. You're a leader within your family, within your church, within your community, within your state, within your nation, within the hotel complex. You're a leader, and you have to accept that fact, right? I do find a lot of people say, well, I don't need to worry about leadership principles because I'm not a leader. And candidly, you're doing a disservice to yourself and your community if you have that approach. We as a nation are struggling. I think you've seen that, right? What's been going on in the last several months in the national capital region is a national disgrace. It is. The fact that we had to shut down the government, that we couldn't pass a budget, that we almost defaulted on our debt. I mean, that's a national embarrassment. But you cannot blame the folks in Washington for the situation we're in. You have to blame yourself, right? Because you're an American, right? We're all supposed to be working through these things together. I just find too many people just wash their hands of it and say, well, it's not my problem. You know, it's the folks in Washington. Well, Sarah and I lived in Washington for the last 2 years. We were on active duty, and I guarantee they're not going to figure it out up there, right? They're not. We are at the local level. And the way we're going to do that is if we become effective, adaptive leaders ourselves, and then use those leadership skills to touch the people we're around and our community. Who here thinks that they're an effective leader already? You got to ask yourself that all the time. You know, I'm a marginally effective leader. I say that word because I'm always trying to improve. The most important piece of your furniture in your house is your mirror. Thank you for those that have been here before. All right. Want to make sure you were paying attention. All right. The most important piece of furniture in your house is your mirror, and you ought to be looking in the mirror all the time and asking yourself, how you doing? I mean, are you indeed being the best person you can be? Are you indeed being the best, most effective leader you can be? Who just joined that leader development program, what you described? See, God bless you all, because you had to apply for the program. You've asked to be trained to be a leader in your respective fields, so God bless you all. And over time, you'll evolve to the point where you are the leader, right? You're going to continue to work through that. Who here is an adaptive leader? If you think you're an effective leader, who here is an adaptive leader? Because my book's all about adaptive leadership. Good. Well, when this is over with, I'm going to ask you to go look in the mirror and ask yourself again whether or not you're an adaptive leader. And if not, you got to make some modifications. Why do we need adaptive leaders in our nation? Yeah, it's an amazing thing to me that people say, I'm going to be this kind of leader, regardless of the circumstances around me, right? We in the military say all the time that the plan never survives the first contact with the enemy, right? Because the enemy's got to vote, things are happening, you got to be able to adjust. And in your business and everybody else's business, things change, right? What changes? What kind of changes do you experience? Yeah, you've got economic changes. You know, the economy's good, the economy's bad. It affects what you're doing. Here in San Antonio, what changes do you experience? You know, the way conventions are handled, big groups, small groups, you know, that's a change. What other changes do you experience? Yeah, everything, every aspect of what you're doing. Competitors, right? You know, Sarah and I work with HEB as well. We met last night over dinner with the chief operating officer. HEB has a problem these days. You know what their problem is? Walmart, right? Walmart's a $500 billion enterprise. HEB is a $20 billion enterprise, and Walmart has declared war on HEB. You know, in general terms, if there's an HEB store goes up, what goes up next to it? A Walmart. And then what can they do if they're the $500 billion monster? Yeah, they can cut the prices down to nothing to kind of drive their competition out. Do you experience something like that? Of course you do. In whatever environment you have, conditions change, and you got to be able to adjust and adapt. And as I talk to corporate America, I find that is the biggest problem because people get so rigid. No, by golly, this is the way we're going to do it. Why? Because this is the way we've always done it, regardless of what's taking place. So I'm going to try to coach you through techniques on how you can become a more adaptive leader, and you can indeed lead a more adaptive organization. The first principle, and again, there's 9 of them. They're in the back of the book, and you can hear the stories as you read through the book. The first principle is opportunities, not obstacles, right? It's all about attitude these days, right? I find it all the time that people run into adverse situations, conditions have changed, and rather than adapt, they say, oh, this is an obstacle. Just throw up our hands and say, okay, that's as far as this goes. We can't go anywhere else. What happens when they do that? They die. Game over, right? That's why the book is entitled Adapt or Die. And in my world, on the battlefields of Iraq, if we did not adapt, then literally people were going to die. In your world, if you don't adapt and make modifications, you're going to die as an organization. You just are, right? So it's all about attitude. You got to focus on opportunities, not obstacles. There's a barrier there. What are you going to do about it? Well, what you ought to do as an adaptive leader is to back up, assess the situation, and then based on your flexible circumstances, make modifications. Who has read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? If you haven't read that book, I'd recommend it. It's really a cartoon book. It's an easy read, you know, and it's about change. And I'll tell you the quick Cliff Notes version of the book. So there's these 4 entities, 2 mice, Sniff and Scurry, and 2 little people, Hem and Haw, right? And for the last several years, their source of nutrition, their cheese, has been in the same place in the maze, right? So every day they get up, they put on their little shoes, and they walk to the through the maze to the point where the cheese normally is, and there they have their cheese. Well, what happened one day? Somebody moved the damn cheese, right? That's the title of the book, Who Moved My Cheese, right? And it happens in your world all the time because circumstances change, and as a result of that, you have to change. So these 4 entities had a choice. The mice said, I'm getting damn hungry. Right? I got to do something. So Sniff, he said, I'm going to have a very strategic approach to this, and he actually smelled out where the cheese had moved to. He'd go somewhere, smell some more, couldn't smell the cheese, went backwards, and found the cheese eventually. What do you think Scurry did? He just ran like hell. Right? I'm going to find this cheese. That's kind of like I am, right? I'm going to take off, bounce into this wall, no cheese there, take off, bounce into this wall, and eventually find the cheese. But both of those entities survived. What about the little people? They didn't survive. You know, him and Hall, they did survive. They just kept going back to where the cheese used to be and hoping that one day the cheese is going to come back, and the cheese never did come back. And one of them ends up dying, the other ends up getting real skinny and finds the cheese in another way. I say that because that's what you have to do as you look for opportunities, not obstacles. You can't just accept the fact that your cheese has been moved and then hope that it's going to come back. What is the definition of insanity? Yeah, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I see that all the time. Now, as Bill mentioned, I'm the executive director for the University of Texas at Arlington Research Institute. And candidly, when I retired, my peers said, whatever you do, don't go work at a university because of institutional inertia and sluggishness and this thing called tenure. And what happens up there is, by golly, we just keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So number one, opportunities, not obstacles. It's your attitude. And oh, by the way, if you've got a positive approach to this, what happens with the people that work for you? Yeah, because it's leadership, right? It's lifestyle evangelism. It's you, no kidding, telling folks that given this circumstance, we're going to make these changes and we're going to be okay. The second thing you got to do as an adaptive leader is to decide when to decide, right? I see this all the time. Who here has to make decisions on a daily basis? Most of you do. If you're in some leadership position, you're probably being asked to make decisions. What I find, the more senior that I get, the slower I need to make the decision. And the first decision I have to make is to decide when to decide. Right? People are going to force you all the time to make a decision because they want the answer right now. And as a result of you not giving them right now, you're afraid that you're going to appear to be indecisive. You can't do that as an adaptive leader. You have to take the time to assess the circumstances and make a decision. You know, who remembers the surge? I mean, I remember it personally because I was there, but back when President Bush announced the surge, what we did is we as a nation realized that even though we'd been in Iraq since 2003, we weren't making substantial change over there because, candidly, we didn't have sufficient soldiers, U.S. coalition soldiers, to do what needed to be done. So President Bush, a man of great moral courage and moral backbone, said, regardless of what the polls say, we're going to send more soldiers into Iraq to give us enough people on the ground to truly make a difference. So when he announced the surge, he was really talking about the division that I had the privilege of commanding, 25,000 soldiers. And it went like this. We had been told all along that we had to go into Iraq in 6 months, and we were going to go into northern Iraq. When the surge was announced, that was changed. And the requirement now was be in Iraq in 6 weeks, 6 months to 6 weeks, and don't go to northern Iraq. Go to southern Iraq. Now, we've done all the analysis, all the studies of northern Iraq, and that's where we were supposed to go. And northern Iraq was relatively peaceful. But southern Iraq is where all the bad guys have been hanging out because nobody had been down there. So we had to go into southern Iraq. What do you think I had to do right away as a strategic leader? First off, I had to assess that as an opportunity, not an obstacle. We're going to really go to a place where we make a significant difference. And I had to decide when to decide. What do you think my staff was doing? 6 months, General, we got 6 months to go into northern Iraq. Now they want us to go into 6 weeks into southern Iraq. What do you think my staff was doing? Yeah, we can't get there from here. You got to go back and tell the president. Yeah, that's a good idea. you got to go back and tell the president, Mr. President, we just don't have the ability to pull this off, so we need 6 months. So the first thing I had to do, candidly, in that situation is decide when to decide, right? Given the analysis of the situation, when was the appropriate time for me to make a decision and announce that decision? And you have to do that as well. The third thing, if you want to be an adaptive leader, is you got to be an engaged leader. What does that mean, be an engaged leader? What's that? Yeah. I contend that you should love those folks assigned to your charge like you love your own children, if you're an engaged leader, right? Somebody, whether it's Bill or somebody, has decided that these people, whether it's the housekeeping staff or the marketing staff or whatever it might be, these people are placed under your charge and care. Now, there are some people who say, okay, I got that. So I'll worry about these people from 8 to 5, right? But in the evenings and on the weekends, they're not my problem, they're somebody else's problem. Does that work? That dog don't hunt, right? That dog don't hunt. Because the people that are entrusted to your care, they believe that you truly will care, that you're going to reach out and make sure that their lives are different. In your business and in HEB's business, what is the most important commodity? People. It's not the facilities, it's not the wonderful heavenly pillows, it's not the showers, it's not any of that stuff. It's the people, right? And if indeed your workforce truly believes that you care and you're an engaged leader, they're going to work harder. How many of your folks actually work only for monetary compensation? That all they really care about is their money, and that's all you need, and just give them more money and they'll be fine. I contend there's very few of those. I mean, we all have to provide for our families. We've all got to pay the rent. We've all got to do those kinds of things. But people like the human touch. I tell folks all the time, leadership is a contact sport, right? I see leaders around the world who never talk to their workforce. They never go out amongst them. They're not walking around. I mean, I've seen Bill in action. He's out and about. He's talking to you all the time. Last night with Craig Boyan, the COO of HEB, I told him that when I go in HEB stores, they talk about him because he's out and about talking to the people, talking to the workforce. That's engaged leadership. Engaged leaders ask intrusive questions, right? This is going to take a while to sink in, right? Again, you're going to go home tonight and look in the mirror and ask yourself whether you're truly an adaptive leader and an engaged leader. And I use this story to make the point. See, I care about all my subordinates like I care about my own children. That's the definition of an engaged leader. So what I would do on active duty is a youngster would be assigned to me, and I'd meet him and I'd greet him. And I'd say, welcome to the team. And I'm the lieutenant general and he's the private, right? There's a little difference. You guys know the difference between the general and the private? I mean, there's a little difference. The Army's got a million people, less than 50 of us were 3- and 4-star generals, so there's a real difference. But candidly, everybody on your team is as important as everybody else, regardless of whether you're the private or the general. So I'd greet the new private. And then I'd say in the course of the conversation, who do you love the most? Who's the most important thing to you, the person to you? And they'd say my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, whatever it might be. And then at that point, I'd say, what's their phone number, right? And with great hesitation, they'd give me their phone number. And we would call their loved one right there on the spot. And the way the conversation goes like this, you always got to, when you're the Army calling, you got to make sure they know it's not bad news because they think it's bad news when the Army's calling. So they'd pick up the phone. I'd say, ma'am, this is General Lynch. Your son has joined my team here at 3 Corps in Fort Hood, and we're just happy to have him on the team. And I'm just going to tell you, ma'am, that we're going to take great care of Johnny, right? We're going to love Johnny. We're going to make sure Johnny's properly trained. And you just got to rest assured that Johnny's going to be okay under our care. And then I'd ask the intrusive question, ma'am, is there anything I should know about Johnny? Right? Because she loves Johnny like you're supposed to love Johnny, right? And this is a true statement. At one point in time, the mom said, well, General, thanks for the call. You might want to know that in high school, Johnny had an anger management problem. He got in fights all the time, right? So I just make a mental note that maybe we got to work with Johnny on anger management. In another case, the mom said, General, you might want to know that Johnny, as he moved from home to basic training, he got a DUI. He was driving under the influence. I make a mental note. Maybe we got a drinking problem here, right? And in one case, the mom said, General, you might want to know that at basic training, Johnny tried to kill himself, right? Suicidal attempts, suicidal ideations, but at least I knew that, and as a result of that, I could be a more effective leader. Now, as I talk to the civilian community, everybody takes that as an affront. What do you mean you're going to call somebody's parents? We can't do that. right? We can't do that. Yes, you can, and candidly, you should, right? If you care about your people. Now, what is that going to do to your people? What's that going to do? Once they get through the awkwardness of the moment, what's that going to do for them? It's going to show them that you truly care, right? How's the phrase go? Yeah, Sarah taught me this. It's in the book. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? You have to demonstrate that for the people that are working for you. The next principle that goes along the lines of that is look down, not up. What do you think that means? Yeah, if you take care of the folks entrusted to your care, they're going to take care of you. Now, what I found candidly is some leaders who just profess, I care for my people, but they don't do anything, right? So what happens there? The leader loses all credibility, right? You got to look down, not up. As a division commander and a corps commander, I refused to keep a schedule. Why do you think that was? I had a lot of my subordinate leaders, generals, colonels, lieutenant colonels, who would try to access my schedule, and as a result of that, know when the general is going to come visit, right? And what would they do? If I would announce to one of my units that I'm going to come visit you in a week, what do you think they do for the next week? Yeah, they just get ready for the visit. And then I'm going to see things that really aren't ground truth, but rather what they want me to see. So I didn't do that. I just got in my van on any given day and went out and visited people in the training rooms and the motor pools, out on the training areas, whatever that might be. What's that called in the civilian world? Managed? What's that? What's it? A shock?
Shock and awe.
Shock and awe? No, it's called managed by walking around. I mean, leadership is a contact sport. And candidly, regardless whether you lead 3 people or 300 people, the less time you spend in the office and the more time you're out and about, the better leader you're going to be. And what do you do while you're out and about? Remember, you're looking down and not up. What do? You acknowledge what they're doing. You appreciate their service. You ask them if they have any questions. This is very important. At your level, there's no such thing as a casual conversation, right? Remember that. So if you got somebody that's working for you and you say, how's the family? And they say, well, I'm glad you asked. You know, I'm having all these problems. My son's struggling in school. My daughter's having all these problems. They've told you now. What do they expect? They expect you to do something about it, right? Now you know their problem. Rather than just say, okay, thanks for telling me, and then go on about your business, you have to do something. There's no such thing as a casual conversation. But if you look down, not up, what's going to happen? If you help them professionally and you help them personally, what's going to happen? I just heard the word. That loyalty factor is going to exponentially increase. And by golly, they're going to come to work and do the best they can. Why? Because they don't want to let you down, right? They don't want to let you down. They don't want to let the team down. They're going to do the best they can because they don't want to let anybody down. Now, when I talked to HEB this afternoon, I'm talking to the customer service folks, and a major problem that they have in HEB and other stores like that is the turbulence that they have with the cashiers and the baggers, right? Because people come and people go, or they're really not committed, so they call in that day and say, I'm not coming in that day, and then people got to struggle to get somebody on that register. When you go to grocery stores, what do you expect when you get to the checkout line? Service. You expect service. You expect not having a big long line. You expect the cashier to be in a pleasant mood. You expect the bagger to be helpful, right? How's all that happen? Engage leadership. You know, it's making sure that the people on your team know they're important. You know, candidly, one of the most important things I hope to leave with you is this idea. Everybody on the team is as important as everybody else. I don't care if you've been at work one day or one decade. I don't care. Everybody's equally important. And if you get that out, then people will understand that, and indeed accolades will flow. The next thing. You've got to be a mentor. And you have to seek out mentorship, right? Who here has a mentor? Okay, let me give you my definition of mentor, and then I'll ask the question again. A mentor is somebody who has three attributes. One is they're accessible, two is they listen, and three is they truly care. They're accessible, they listen, and they truly care. When you read the book, and I do hope the book is read and not just placed on a shelf, when you read the book, you'll see that I've been blessed with 6 mentors over the course of my career. These are individuals who I aspired to be like. Maybe you aspire to be like Bill. Maybe even though you're brand new into the developmental program, you've got in your mind that in 20 or 30 years, I'd like to be the general manager, right? And the way you do that is you work very, very hard, but you reach out routinely to your mentors and ask them, what do I do now? Even today, I find myself in circumstances where I don't know what to do, so I reach out to my mentors and say, what should I do? And they give me advice. What's the critical node between the mentor and the mentee? What's the critical node there? What's the most important piece of that relationship? It's trust, right? It's trust, right? So in many cases, I've asked my mentor for advice, and my mentor gave me advice that I chose just to disregard, right? That's okay. That's what goes on between mentees and mentors. So I hope that you are indeed an effective mentor, that you are accessible, you listen, and you truly care. And then I hope that you as a mentee are looking for people to help you. Do you aggressively mentor your folks here? Do you make it a point to talk to them about what's on their mind and what's in their life? How can they be better? I mean, those are critical aspects of what you're doing.
One thing on the associate development plan that we just talked about, each one of those 6 are assigned an executive committee mentor.
Oh, excellent.
The idea is exactly what you're talking about, that they spend time getting to know each other and have a confidant.
Excellent. That's excellent.
Along the way.
How many of you are routinely counseled? Somebody sits you down and tells you how you're doing, right? I'm not talking about ass chewings. I'm talking about counseling, right? How many of you routinely counsel the people that work for you, right? So here's the deal. You know, I left West Point convinced that counseling was the keys to the kingdom, right? And some people connect counseling with a negative connotation. You know, what happened? I got counseled. What'd you do wrong, right? So what I did when I left West Point is I came up with a real simple counseling form, and on the top of it is strengths, in the middle is areas for improvement, and the bottom is objectives. And as a lieutenant, I counsel everybody who worked for me once a month in writing. As I became more and more senior, it was about once a quarter, but it was still a requirement to be counseled routinely. And I do that now in my role as the executive director. So you sit down with a scheduled event, and this is where I see people struggling. See, walking from here back down to Zoka with one of your subordinates next to you and talking to them as you go, that's a form of counseling. But that's not what I'm talking about, right? In the military, we talk about foot locker counseling. We talk about counseling as you walk to the motor pool, that kind of stuff. And those are important events. But you got to have a period of time. It normally takes about an hour where you're sitting one-on-one with the person that you're counseling, right? And the first thing you do is highlight strengths. Why do you do that first? Yeah, accentuate the positive. Everybody's got strengths, right? Everybody's got strengths. Even if you've got an employee who's struggling, there's still something good there, right? They showed up at work on time, they combed their hair nicely, whatever it might be. But you got to start the counseling session on a positive note, strengths. And then you talk about their weaknesses, but you don't call it weaknesses, right? Why don't you call it weaknesses? Yeah, if you say weaknesses, immediately their barriers go up. Okay, who the hell you think you are telling me I got weaknesses, right? So you call it areas for improvement. What are those things that the two of you working together can improve, right? You're doing this, I'm doing this, working together, how can we do better? Areas for improvement. And then the third thing is objectives, right? Okay, we're going to get together again in 30 days. You're going to come back into this office. We're going to sit down in 30 days. What will we have accomplished in those 30 days? And then in the next counseling session, what you do is you start with the previous counseling and the objectives. and you assess how do we do, right? How do we do on these things? And then talk about strengths, areas for improvement, objectives for the next 30 days. And I hope you're doing that. In the military, candidly, we don't do that very well. If I was in the Army 35 years, how many times in those 35 years do you think I was effectively counseled? 5 times. 5 times, 35 years, something's wrong. So in organizations that I led, I mandated counseling. And you can call it coaching, you can call it whatever you want. In the university setting, they hate the word counseling, they want to talk about coaching, whatever you want to call it. But it's important that you work together to improve. And it's all part of looking down and not up. It's critical. The next one that's critical if you're going to be an adaptive leader is that you are maintaining a positive attitude for sure. You are maintaining a, see, they didn't pay attention last 2 times, did they? No, they didn't. You are maintaining, they think it's a trick. You are maintaining a work-life balance, right? You are maintaining a work-life balance. It's amazing to me the number of people who work, and they say, I'll play tomorrow. Or there's an amazing me the number of people who say, I'm going to work, but I'm going to spend time with my family tomorrow. Or the number of people who say, I'm going to work, and I'm going to call the person that I love and tell them I love them tomorrow. What's wrong with that equation? Yeah, there's no guarantee you have tomorrow, right? There is no guarantee you have tomorrow. It's in the book of James. You know, nobody promised you tomorrow. They only promised you today. God gave you today. That's why it's called the present, right? So how do you maintain a work-life balance? Are you all very busy? Do you know anybody that's not very busy? You know? Everybody's very busy. How do you maintain a work-life balance? How do you get to the point where you can work hard and you can play hard? That you can focus on your profession, you can also focus on your family. How do you get to that? Effective time management, right? And I spend a lot of time in the book talking about time management because the difference between an extremely successful individual organization or a moderately successful individual organization is time management. How do you manage your time? Has everybody seen the Franklin Covey book on time management? Yeah. If you haven't, I'd recommend that you pull that up. They talk about quadrants of time management, and it's based on what's urgent and what's important, right? Quadrant 1 is everything is urgent and everything's important. What's that mean? Everything's a crisis, right? Everything. Yeah, we're firefighting. All we're going to do is come in today and fight that near-term fire. Candidly, as dismal as this comment might appear to be, that's the way it is in the Pentagon. Everything in the Pentagon is quadrant 1, crisis management. What are we going to respond to today? It's an amazing thing. As a 3-star general, I found myself going from meetings to meetings. And as I was moving from one meeting to another meeting, a colonel would stop me in the hallway and hand me a book. And the book was, when they get to this slide, say these things, right? Because folks didn't have time to think, right? You can't run a railroad that way. So quadrant 1, you got to stay out of. Everything can't be urgent and important. You got to stay out of quadrant 3 as well, where everything is urgent but not important, right? And I don't know whether or not you guys deal with that, but I found that in the last organization I commanded. People would be going from one meeting to the next meeting. What do you think the purpose of the meeting was? To plan the next meeting, right? Plan the next meeting. They go through long meetings, nothing would come out of it. That's quadrant 3. That's where you're hanging out in quadrant 3. Or I use the analogy in MCOM of quadrant 3 activities. I'd be walking along the street. I'd see a youngster working his rear end off, digging a hole, right? He's just sweating. It's 110 degrees outside. He's got his shirt off. His muscles are glistening in the sun. He's just sweating. So I'd stop and say, young man, what are you doing? He'd say, General, I'm digging this hole. I'd say, good job. Keep it up, right? And I'd go away. I'd come back the next day, same guy, same location, working hard, muscles glistening in the sun, sweating his butt off, 110 degrees, and he's filling in that hole, right? What are you doing there, young man? General, I'm filling in this hole. Good job. Keep it up. And I go away. And then I'd stop to think about, what did I just experience, right? The person that worked very hard on something that was urgent, but it wasn't important. Digging in the hole, filling in the hole, digging in the hole, filling in the hole. That's quadrant 3. Where do you want to be at? Personally and professionally, where do you want to be at? You want to be in quadrant 2, where you focus on things that are important but not urgent. And you define those things with your bosses. You define those things with your family. You define those things in your relationship with God. You decide that, but you spend time focusing on what's important and what's important but not urgent. And how do you do that? If it's the critical piece, how do you do that? You take the time to think about it. You decide when to decide. You talk to your boss and get definition of what's important. What do you got to really focus on so that you're not hole digging or you're not just going from one crisis to another. I had the privilege of talking to you all about diversity. One of the principles is always celebrate diversity, right? You got to have people around you that aren't like you, right? The comfort zone we all get into is, okay, I just want my inner circle to be like me, right? Because it's easy that way, right? All they do is mirror back what you think. They tell you what you're going to say anyway, and as a result of that, there's no friction, no conflict. What's the problem with that? There's no growth. You're not going to go anywhere, right? Who has limitations in this room? Yeah, I tell you, I am embarrassed every day with my personal limitations. And my wife can tell you what they are. And I tell you what they are in the book, you know, but I am quick to anger. I tend to be judgmental. I tend to not listen well, right? There are things that I just don't like I don't like computers. I don't like social media. I don't like email. I don't like those things, right? So what do you do as a leader if you want to be effective and adaptive? You acknowledge your limitations, and then you surround yourself by people who can address those limitations, right? That way you're getting the kind of robust feedback that you need to be an effective leader. Right now, I'll use social media as an example. If you get to be like me, and you don't like computers, you don't like email, you don't like Facebook, there's this thing called Twitter that I got no idea what the hell it is, but people are doing that all the time. You know, Bill and I talked today about what you see these days where two folks in a room texting each other instead of talking to each other, you know, which is an amazing thing to me. Can you just ignore that whole aspect? You know, if you're not comfortable, can you just say, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to mess with that? Of course not, you can't. You know, I remember vividly going to one of the installations that I commanded, and the garrison commander had put together this video on energy conservation. And he and his sergeant major had went through the demonstration of turning off lights, and he was very proud of this public service announcement that was going to be played on the local TV station. And then he took me into a room of 500 family members. And it was still on my mind, and I was very proud of this video, so I asked the group, how many of you actually watched the local TV station in which this video is being played? 500 people. How many folks raised their hand? 2 people, right? 2 people. So we'd put all that effort into that, but we weren't communicating. So I asked the question then that I ask all the time. If you had a choice between one of 3 ways to get your information, either the internet, TV, radio, or newspapers, where would you like to get your information? Where do you think the majority of people said, this is where I get my information? Internet, 90% now. 90% of people would prefer to be looking at that computer or that iPad or that iPhone than actually talking to some human being. And I find that to be frustrating, but it's where we are. So if you're going to be a leader, you got to celebrate diversity and have people around you who can compensate for your weaknesses. And one of mine is lack of awareness of social media. What about this active listening problem I got? How many of you all are good leaders or good listeners? You are. I am indeed a lousy listener. Guys like me, and it's not just a gender thing, it could be ladies as well, like me. What happens in the course of the conversation, I find myself thinking about what I'm going to say as opposed to listening to what the other person's saying. Now, I don't know if you're there or not there, but I do know that's where I am. And the hardest thing I do is active listening. I mean, candidly, in my environment now, where most of the folks that work for me aren't Americans. You know, this is a statement of fact of where we are as a nation, but we're not raising scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians as a nation. So to get those research scientists, you have to go somewhere else. So there's nobody that works for me at the Research Institute named Bubba. I don't have any Bubbas up there, right? I got Mutu and Johnsik, I've got Aditya, I got folks from China, from India, from Iran, around the world. Can you imagine if you're struggling already with active listening, to do active listening for somebody in which English is not their native language, right? It's kicking my butt. It really is. So what you have to do is you have to surround yourself with folks who are good listeners. So they're not missing what you're missing, and then they're going to feed you that information so that indeed you can be informed. So always celebrate diversity. How are we doing on time? I keep looking at my watch, but I forget what time I started. I'm going to get the last one here, and then because I do want time for questions, and then if indeed any of you would like me to inscribe your book individually, I'm happy to do that as well. But we got another presentation downtown pretty soon right after this. The last one I want to talk about is having fun. You know, are you all having fun? You know, every day do you get up in the morning and you're excited about going to work, and in the evening when you go home, you're excited about coming back in the next day? I hope that's true. Again, you're going to go home and look in the mirror, right? If you're not having fun, what's happening to your workforce? Yeah, they're not having fun either. You know, if you're walking around as a leader and you're kicking rocks, you know, and you're mad about the day, and, you know, the fact that Bill did this or Bill did that is causing you to have a bad day, what are you doing as a leader? Yeah, you're sharing your bad day with everybody, right? And as a result of that, everybody is brought down. You know, Patton said a lot of leadership is acting, right? Do you all have bad days? Or is every day just a glorious day here at the Westin, right? Glorious day. Yeah, every day is a glorious day at the Westin. So you do have bad days. I have bad days, right? What do you have to do as a leader if you're having a bad day? You got to fake it. It's acting, right? You got to pretend that you're having fun. Is that possible to do? Sure it is. Does it take some effort? How do you do that? What do you do that? How do you do that? You go off into a quiet place and pump yourself up, right? Sarah and I were married 31 years ago. Best day of my life, right? Prior to getting married, you had to go see a chaplain so they would marry you. And this particular chaplain says, I'll marry you if you promise to take a personality profile before you get married, right? Who's taking the Myers-Briggs personality indicator? It might be something that you all want to do if you haven't done that, to get to know yourself, because you got to be self-aware. So Sarah and I took the test. We went away. Came back the next day. The chaplain looked kind of ashen. He looked us in the eyes and says, whatever you two do, don't get married, right? Says there's not two people more different. You know, I was a pegged out INTJ. Sarah was a pegged out ESFP, right? That might not mean anything to you, but I'll concentrate on one thing, the I versus the E, right? I am an introvert, right? I am. Do I appear to be an introvert? No, but I know I am. Now, we have taken the test multiple times over the years, and we're now grown towards the middle. I mean, I'm less of an introvert, and she's less of an extrovert. But we still have cases in point. For example, we've been doing book signings around the nation, right? 50, 100 people, depending on where we are, come by, look at us to do a book signing. And she's there with me, right? And she greets them first, and she gets their information, then I write it down. If you're an extrovert, what does engagement with people do for you? It pumps you up. You know, every time you get to meet somebody else, by God, you're fired up, you know. When Sarah and I go out to places, go to a party, for example, we get back in the car, what happens? Yeah, she turns to me and said, what'd I do wrong, right? Because I'm quiet, because I'm exhausted. Everybody in that room just drained me. I got nothing left, right? I got nothing left. But what we found is in the book signing, for example, she gets excited, I get drained, but together We're working to make sure we appear to be having a great time. That's what it's all about. So you got to have fun. And if you're not having fun, I'd ask you to focus on what you can do to have fun. What's in... I know you are. I know you are. But I'm wore out time we're done. If you're not having fun, there's a major problem. It's a major problem as a leader because your workforce is not going to have fun either. Your family's not going to have fun. If you go home in a bad mood, what's happening? Yeah, you bring everybody else down. The kids get in a bad mood. The dog gets mad. You know, everybody gets in a bad mood. So I'd ask that you think about that. And I'm just going to real quickly highlight where we are. Appendix 1. Focus on opportunities, not obstacles. Have fun. Achieve a work-life balance. Decide when to decide. Look down, not up. Be a mentor. Engage. Leadership's important. Always celebrate diversity. And the only one I didn't talk about is be demanding, but not demeaning. And I left that for the end. What's the difference between being demanding and demeaning? If you're a leader, what's the difference? Say yeah? Yeah, exactly. Can you be demanding but not demeaning? Right? If you want to be a high-performing organization, you have to be demanding as a leader. You have to expect for people to perform their jobs to the best of their ability. You got to make sure that they're coming to work to give it all they can give it at that day. How do you make sure that happens? You teach, coach, and mentor them. You counsel them. You're an engaged leader. You find out about their family situation. You help them through any kind of difficult circumstances. That's being demanding. You can get stuff done. When do you cross the line to be demeaning? When you start belittling people. You start ranting and raving. You start calling them names. You start making them feel small because you're in a position of authority. You make them feel small. That's demeaning. So as a leader, you got to be demanding, but you don't have to be demeaning. You don't have to cross that line. So with that, again, I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to the Westin family. Sarah and I consider ourselves to be part of your family. We love this place. Every time we come in, it's an amazing experience every time. From the time we get out of the car and the individual greets us, to the time we get into our hotel room, to the time we go down to Zoka, to the time we leave. It's always an amazing experience. So we're just very proud to be part of the Westin family, and I always cherish the opportunity to come back and share with you my thoughts and ideas. And thank you for your help in putting this book together, because it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had a chance to come down and talk to you about thoughts and ideas. And just know I cherish our friendship. Any questions of me? I know you guys got to get back to work, but is there anything I talked about you'd like me to elaborate on? Or dear, would you like to say anything? Anything? Sir?
So at that point in your career when you were a three-star general and tough choices to make, who was your mentor at that point?
Yeah, great question. So when I ran a workforce of 120,000 people that were all civilian, right, a $12 billion enterprise, I reached out to a new mentor named Reg Brack, who's the chairman emeritus of Time Warner Incorporated. I went looking for somebody who had similar duties and responsibilities and asked him. One of the major things I had to do was downsize. I had to get rid of some of my people because, as you know, half your budget is tied up in people. It just is. I had to get rid of some of the people because I had to go from 20 billion a year to 15 billion a year generally. So I just found that mentor who'd done something similar. So that's what you do. And what I find is most people like being a mentor. They like the fact that their opinion is welcomed. Anything else?
Maybe just your perspective. A leader is made or born?
See, I do interviews all the time, and there's a group of people out there who believe that leaders are born, and I'm not part of that. Now, Patton did say, and I'm a student of Patton, and reading a book like that will help you as you mature your leadership skills. I've probably read every book about leadership there is. I tend to concentrate on books that are written by people who have led, as opposed to people who studied leading, right? But I've read a lot of Patton, and Patton says you can't make a poodle a bird dog. All right, just think about that. You can't make a poodle a bird dog. So there are certain intrinsic kind of characteristics of somebody that makes them a good leader. But that's really small on the scale, right? Most of it is you grow leaders, right? You talk to them, you identify them. I'm sure what Bill has done with his development program is not only took you as an example of person to put into it, but the fact that he's observed behavior. And this person's probably going to be a good leader at some point in time. You nurture them. I mean, these days, the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that the folks that were lieutenants in our battalions in 1993 are now general officers, right? They've grown over time, and we're happy that we had a small role in their development. So please don't get on the bandwagon that the leaders are born. I don't buy it, right? Leaders are made over time. But you got to want to be a good leader, right? You really got to go home at night and look in the mirror and say, where am I at? Strengths, weaknesses, what do I need to work on? Acknowledge that you got some problems. Even Clint Eastwood taught me that. A man's got to know his limitations, right? Anything else? Okay.
What's the biggest difference, though, between now leading at the research center, where you have a diverse workforce, and leading in the military? Is there one thing that really sticks out as a difference?
Yeah. In the military, in general terms, people do what they're told, right? In general terms, right? If you tell a platoon, a battalion, a corps, go left, they'll go left. And then later they ask you, hey, General, why did we have to go left, right? In the civilian world, what I find is you've got to describe why we're doing this before they do it, right? And in the university setting, I have to define what's in it for them. You know, what do they get out of this activity? What's in it for me? So that's the number one issue. You just have to be conscious of the fact that people expect you to tell them why they got to do something rather than just do it. Right? That's the biggest difference. Anything else?
Any other questions? Well, again, Rick, your insight's always invaluable, so thank you very much.
Thank you, folks. God bless you.
We're all managing the dash. If you remember, talking about work-life balance, the dash, right? From when you were born to that last day, how'd you manage that? What did you do? Did you do everything you wanted in that period? So again, that's a very important principle related to work-life balance. So Rick's kind enough to inscribe some books. If you'd like, you know, a personal note, please. Well, maybe do it right here. And then we'll get a chair and come up and get your book noted. And again, can't thank you enough, Rick, for everything. And Sarah, it's fantastic seeing you again. We know we'll see you soon back.
Thanks.
All right. Thank